In this video, I will show you how to create a very simple two-table database describing relationship between students taking some classes at a college. So obviously, just from the description, we know that we'll create two tables. One is students and the other is classes. So let's begin with the very first one. Table 1, we're going to go to Design View and name it Students. And now in this table we need to describe a typical student. So a student would have some first name, a student would have some last name, every student would have some date of birth, some email, so we know how to contact them, maybe phone number, some address. And you can keep adding fields which describe a student in your database. Now, we need also to think about a field which will allow us to uniquely identify each record in this students table. And this is going to be student ID. So I'm just going to change the auto-generated primary key. You see the icon here? And I'll just type primary key. So instead of ID and data type of auto number, I'm going to change it to student ID, which is more appropriate for students table, and change it to short text, just in case your college is using not only numbers but also some text, for example, like the first letters from the last and first name. So now let's look at the data type. We have short text for student ID, first name, last name, date of birth. I'm going to change to date and time. Email looks good. Phone number you can change either to numbers, or you can leave it as short text if you're going to add some, for example, parentheses or dashes in between, and address is going to be short text. So all looks good. I'm going to close and save it. And now I'm going to create our second table, which is going to be students. I'll go to Design View, and I'm sorry, it's going to be classes, and type classes, click OK. So each class has some subject, right? English, physics, psychology. So I'm just going to type subject, and just in description, that's what I mean, XAS and so on. Each class has some level, like it's not just English, but it's English 101, for example, or CIS 200 and so on. So each class will have an instructor, and that's going to be name. Each class has some start date and end date, and has some schedule. Okay, and each class, to be uniquely identified, needs to have some field which will allow us to do so. And usually, let's say you're taking English 101, but how do you know which class actually to go to? Because there may be many classes which give you English 101 class. So you look for your own section, and the section number is the field that we're going to use as a unique identifier for each of the record in the classes table. So I'm just going to change it to section number. And section number is just going to be number data type, and I'm just saying it's primary key. And let's look at the data types. For subject, short text works well. For level, it's just going to be numbers, so I'm going to change it to number. Instructor, short text. Start date should be date and time, the same as with end date. And schedule, I'm probably just going to say that's, like, for example, Tuesday from 10 to 11, so I'm just going to leave as short text. Okay, and I think I'm done, so I'm going to close it, save it. And I'm going to establish the relationship between these two tables. I'll click on Database Tools, go to Relationships, and add both tables to this canvas view, to this area over here. And so now I need to think about how these two tables are going to relate to each other. So obviously, if you think about it, every student or each student can take multiple classes. So we're going to say that's going to be one student taking many classes, so it's one-to-many relationship. To create this, I actually need to add a foreign key field in the classes table. So I'm going to take the primary key from students table, student ID, and add it to classes. And once the student ID field moves to classes, it becomes foreign key, because student ID doesn't describe anything in classes. It describes students, but not classes. That's why it becomes foreign to this table. So to do this, I'm going to open classes in Design View and add student ID field in here. And this is going to be foreign key. Now you need to make sure that the data type in the foreign key is the same as in the primary key it's going to be linked to or joined with. So I'm going to click on Students, go to Design View, make sure Student ID is a short text. So in classes, the foreign key Student ID should be short text as well. And it all looks good, so I'm going to save and close. And now you see that classes table in the database tool in the relationships view has this foreign key field added. So I'm just going to link them. I'm just clicking on student ID and students, dragging it over, hovering over student ID field in classes table, release it. And in this dialog window, click on Enforce Referential Integrity, click Create, and now as you can see, I have one-to-many, see this infinity sign, to many relationship between these two tables. One student can take many classes. Okay, and so I'm going to close it, save the layout, and basically the database is ready to go. I can start entering the data if I click on Students table. Now in the datasheet view, I can start entering information in here. Now please notice that in Design View, we created these fields: first name, last name, date of birth, and so on. In Datasheet View, these fields become the headers of the columns. So once I enter information in the row, like the first row, this information will constitute the first record. So let's say our student ID is going to be 1000, the first name is going to be Mary, say Black, date of birth is going to be, I'll just change the year, 1998, email, Mary at, let's say, gmail.com, the phone number, and so on. Because I left this as a short text field, not just numbers, I can actually add the additional symbols here, like dashes, for example. This is our first record, and because I joined these tables, I can actually populate some information through this table to classes table. So if you click on this plus sign over here, you can add corresponding information in the classes table. Let's say Mary takes some, this is section number, let's say English 101 class with instructor, let's say Long, with the start date, let's say it was sometime in February, with the end date, let's say in May, Okay, and now we have created one record in students table and one record in classes table. So if I collapse this by clicking on this minus sign, so you see this record about Mary Black. That's our first record. And if you open classes table, you see that there is a matching information to our Mary Black with the student ID 1000. See in this classes table, you still see this 1000 information about the student ID and the information about the actual class. So that's the section number, it's English 101, instructor is long, the start date, the end date, and so on. So that's how we create relational databases. In this case, it's a very simplistic one, just two-table database. But what I really want you to take out of this short video, that when we create those, the important things is to not only figure out how to what fields you should use, but also make sure that you understand that when you create anything in data, in design view, you see all these fields, you know, like in here, but when you go, when you're ready to start entering information and you go to datasheet view, these fields become the headers of the columns, and each row will constitute a record. And so basically each table is just a combination of different records. So you just can keep adding those records, like, you know, for 1000, that's going to be Joe White, and with a different date of birth, let's say 1998, and so on. Okay, and again you can add the information, corresponding information about the class that this Joe White is taking. Let's say it's going to be CIS 105 with instructor Brown, and so on. Now if I close these tables, you will see that the records are still there. In the classes table, you still see the matching record for our student with ID 1001, and the class the student is taking, CIS 105, with the instructor, and so on.